Welcome back to Bold Like a Leopard. I want to remind you guys to like the video before we keep going. But in any case, whether you like my content or not, I think we have to acknowledge that it's a good time not to quit your day job if you're a content creator. Unfortunately, we're living in a volatile economy in terms of the news business, in terms of people who are creators on YouTube or on digital media of any type. Even in gaming, you have a lot of these companies like Bethesda, which I'm not a big gaming buff, but it's been widely shared in the news that Bethesda and EA, those companies are kind of going through a lot of volatility right now. But in general, in the regular economy, the economy of as a whole, Americans aren't doing very bad. And I don't necessarily focus a lot on the stock market or on labor statistics in my on my channel. Once in a while, I'll showcase a topic that's related to that. The Obamacare issues were some of the bigger ones that I covered. Not as much recently because there hasn't been enough movement on it. But certainly the fact that Trump and the Republican Congress failed to repeal it, that was a huge point of frustration for me during his first 2 years. And it's still, for me, that is the big issue for him. But there's one area I don't think that you can necessarily criticize him, which is that despite the failure on Obamacare, and despite all of this talk about, well, he hasn't brought the wall yet, when he said that he would bring jobs back to the USA, he wasn't lying. And there continues to be a boom in the manufacturing industry. I go online and I look for jobs periodically. I have a job at the moment, but it's only good until the summer. So I see a lot of work out there, and for a diverse range of technical positions. So for me, I would say that the Trump economic vision has been a success up until now. Of course, we can't necessarily rely on that to succeed because we're talking about a global economy in some ways where China and some of the other countries that are, they're competitive rivals of us, China, India. There's in South America, some people still consider Brazil to be a competing economy, even though we don't know what's going to happen over there. The U.S., though, has done a lot to strengthen its position in terms of industry, in terms of manufacturing, and even to some degree in terms of the service economy, although long term we don't know how that will work. So it says job growth in January shattered expectations with non-farm payroll surging by 304,000 despite a partial government shutdown that was the longest in history. So this is the second straight month in a row that job creation has blown through the ceiling of the media predictions. Economists surveyed by Dow Jones had expected payrolls to rise by 170,000 and the unemployment rate to hold steady at 3.9%. In all, it was a powerful performance at a time when economists increasingly have said they expect growth to slow in 2019. January marked 100 months in a row of positive job creation, by far the longest streak on record. So those people that are Democrats, they will probably correctly assert that, under President Obama, there was positive job growth. 100 months means that 10 years would be 120 months. So you have about over 9 years of positive job growth, if you want to think of it that way. So yes, job growth was pretty strong under President Obama, but it's taken off with much more consistency under Donald Trump, partially because he is increasing the focus on conditions that will bring more industrial workers in. So why is it that the people who they comment on the economy, they comment on basically the way that the people are responding to the Trump policies, they continue to feel that it's a disaster? Well, you could say that it's because they're isolated from the real day-to-day problems of Americans, or you could say that Americans are isolated from their day-to-day problems, which is that people in media digital media specifically, are going through basically a crash. There's a lot of these a lot of these newspapers and online publications. They're basically falling apart. Last week we were talking a lot about what happened at Huffington Post and BuzzFeed, and I also covered what happened at the Forward, where they laid off. I believe it was. I think it was 40%. I don't remember. It's been only a few days, but I don't remember the figure yet anymore. But now we're talking about Vice Media losing 10% of its staff, which is 250 workers. And you have here also the Miami New Times has reported that McClatchy is buying out the salaries of 450 workers. So then you have Verizon, which owns the Huffington Post, Yahoo, and AOL, laid off 7% of its staff, including Pulitzer Prize finalist Jason Cherkis, who, by the way, is a hack journalist who helped defame a few people that I know. BuzzFeed cut 15% of its workforce, decimating entire verticals, and the Gannett Company, which owns more than 1,000 daily and weekly newspapers across the country, eliminated approximately 400 jobs. And you see this person here says, after 4 years at BuzzFeed News, today I was laid off along with the rest of the national team and many more brilliant reporters and editors. I'm so proud of what we've done here. No, I think that it's maybe it's wrong for people to take a certain joy at the misfortune of others, which many others do. So I'm not going to do that in this video, okay? I am happy though that Jason Cherkis finally got laid off, because I think that the Huffington Post, that story that they did, which is a fraud, it shows exactly the type of journalism they do. They try to catch people for stories that actually have no substance behind them. They don't do any real research into the roots of what's going on. And then they expect people to heap praise on them as if they've discovered something. That's not what hardworking journalism is. And you know what? Maybe I'm not doing it either, but I'd say I'm trying a little harder than them. And it's not even my job. So what I'll do instead of just gloating is offer some kind of, the way that I've dealt with, the pressure of employment and losing a job in the past, because I've talked about it a couple times, and I think that really, there's better ways to deal with this than like this. This woman says, after 6+ years, HuffPost, I've been laid off. I'm so proud of the work I've done to uplift Latinx voices here. And we'll miss everyone. If you're looking for a bilingual Latina journalist to cover pop culture, identity, marginalized communities, etc., DM me. So on the one hand, she uses the non-binary Latinx here, and then she uses Latina. So this is the peak virtue signaling, okay? Now, what I'm going to say is this. A few years ago, I graduated from school. I had a master. Actually, first I'll go through before that. So when I graduated with a bachelor's degree, I was essentially working for a company where I was making shit pay. I was making basically $11.50 an hour, working for a guy who, I knew personally, but we weren't, like, he was basically somebody I knew through the community and whatever, and he hired me, and he was saying the company would grow a lot, and it didn't really. And eventually, the office environment was so toxic. We were shouting back and forth across the, he was in the main office, and but we could hear each other, and I'd be in the next room behind my desk, and it was basically a shit show. But, he was able to generate enough business to stay afloat for a very long time, until finally in the spring of 2015, finally the spigot began to run dry, and there wasn't enough work for me to continue to work full time. Plus, I was going to school with my master's at the time. I was going to school for my master's. And, I was like, why am I going to drive every day to work for maybe 3 hours now, because there's not enough work to do a whole day, and then get paid for those 3 hours? Sometimes it was even just 3 hours a week. That's how ridiculous it got. And eventually, because the work was so unfulfilling and there was almost nothing to do, I basically just quit on the guy. And the thing is that his business hasn't grown since then anyway, and it was basically, it's a model of business that I think you don't need that many people in order to maintain it. In fact, I'd say this person, who I'm still on friendly terms with now, is he's doing okay for his needs, but he's not doing okay to the degree that he can sustain a workforce of people. And that he's very upfront about that nowadays, but he's still of the mind that he's going to strike it rich doing what do you call it? Uh, Renewables and energy efficient lighting. Then I got a job, which was the best job I've had so far, as a graduate co-op in mechanical engineering at a major medical device company, health imaging and medical devices. And it was a great job, and it was a lot of work, a lot of very tough work. Getting getting like down on the floor and getting really dirty. There was a lot of coolant and stuff like that. Having to fix basically piping and stuff like that. It was probably physically one of the most demanding jobs I ever did, but I learned a lot from it, and it got me it got me a lot of contacts in the industry. And unfortunately, because it was a graduate co-op, in order to permanently remain at the company, I had to apply for a permanent job, which I never did end up getting over there. So about a year and a half later, I ended up getting a job at a different company that made a completely different set of products that have more to do with robotics and automation. I worked there for about a year. And in the course of that year, I found out that the house that I was renting, the landowner let me know that he was going to sell it and I had to move out. So I ended up buying the house that I'm now living in, which I think I probably mentioned that on videos a few times. But that was a tough decision for me because I'm not really into spending a lot of money, taking out loans or anything. And that pretty much set me back. See, when I was working at the first company, the medical device company, I was making enough money. Basically, I had a lot of expendable income. Once I bought the house, the expendable income it went out the window. You had to pay deposits, you had to pay the escrow, you had to, there was a lot of stuff to do to fix violations and stuff like that. So, for that year, I was basically working my ass off in order to, one, prove myself at that new company, and two, in order to, get the house in order to start the payments on the house, all of that. It was a lot of work, and I was still doing this. And I think that at a certain point, I began to realize I wasn't going to last at that company. And finally, they let me go in February of last year. And since that was a very hard period, you guys might remember that I was putting out a lot of content, but I had to basically skimp and pinch every penny at the time and not do a lot in order to conserve on the money. And eventually, I did get another job as back in the medical device industry. But the fact of the matter is that there were a lot of people who were at the first medical device company that are still looking for jobs. They've been laid off because that company kind of shelled a lot of they went through several rounds of layoffs, and it was a disaster for the people who had been working at that company for 20 years, 30 years. Those people have never griped or bitched to the degree that the people that are complaining about the media are now. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of them are pretty angry because their health insurance gets canceled, or because they know that other people remain at the company that don't necessarily deserve to do so. In fact, my mentor, this was a very shocking sight to me. I saw him put all of his awards from the company into a trash can and burn them. I saw him post something like that. I had to say that it was pretty sad watching him basically say that the career he had was kind of, it's sad for me because I know this person and I learned a lot from him. And, I hated to see this come to that. but people react in different ways, and I'm hoping that we have more people that are able to have longer careers at the same, doing the things that they like to do. But we can't rely on that anymore. So this learn to code thing, I think, is the right thing to say to these journalists, because they mocked the rest of the country for their inability to adapt to the modern economy. And now look at them. Now, the modern economy is now passing them by. And, if they want something to change, they might have to change their own attitudes as well. We have to change our attitudes whenever something bad happens to us too. Okay, I had to change my attitude when I realized that at the first company, the one with the energy efficient lighting, it wasn't going anywhere. I had to realize that, and I ended up quitting. At the second company, basically at a certain point, I hit the ceiling. There was nowhere else to go because I wasn't getting hired for a permanent position. So I had to go and find a different position. And at that place, I ended up getting let go. And it was difficult. And, it was hard to find meaning for the first week, even though I started working harder on things like this and things like my writing and other pursuits, and then my attitude generally changed. I've become more frugal with my finances, which is kind of a necessity. Once you go through that, it kind of changes your attitude towards spending and things like that. And now at the new company, I've been learning to behave as if every day you're basically fighting to survive. You're fighting to remain relevant. You're fighting to do the best job that you can and be the best resource for the team. And those are some lessons that you might learn as just a person who works at a company. If you're running your own business, it's probably other lessons. There's probably other applicable lessons for every profession that there is. So that's about it. Please like this video once again. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and hit the bell so you can receive notifications. If you're not receiving notifications, put a message below or send me an email. Also, please subscribe to me on BitChute and CocoScope, as well as all of the social media behind me. And have a great night.